In the wake of Donald Trump's return to the presidency, the political landscape in both the United States and China is undergoing a significant transformation. As analysts and policymakers grapple with the potential implications of Trump 2.0, many are closely watching how this renewed relationship might evolve, particularly in terms of trade and diplomatic interactions. Initial signs suggest that the honeymoon period could be beneficial for China, but questions linger about the sustainability of this newfound rapport. Chinese analysts express cautious optimism regarding the future of U.S. China relations under Trump's leadership. With the administration's focus on fostering a more favorable trade environment, there is a palpable sense of hope among Chinese businesses and government officials. A recent report from Brookings Institution highlights that many in China anticipate a more pragmatic approach to trade negotiations, possibly leading to a thaw in tensions that have characterized the previous administration's policies. There's a feeling that Trump's second term could open doors that were previously closed, stated a senior analyst at a Beijing-based think tank. "I would rather not impose tariffs on China if we can achieve fair trade through negotiations." This shift in tone may reflect a broader strategy to stabilize the U.S. economy while also addressing domestic concerns about inflation and supply chain disruptions, with lawmakers proposing steep tariffs on imports. This could create a paradox where the administration's more conciliatory approach to bilateral relations is countered by legislative actions that seek to impose stricter economic measures. As China continues to expand its influence in global markets, particularly in South America, the U.S. is faced with the challenge of maintaining its clout. Reports indicate that trade between China and South American nations has surged dramatically, raising concerns about America's strategic interests in the region. Analysts believe that China's aggressive investment in infrastructure and technology could further complicate U.S. foreign policy. Looking ahead, the trajectory of U.S. China relations under Trump 2.0 remains uncertain. While current indications suggest a potential for cooperation and economic engagement, the underlying tensions and the unpredictable nature of Trump's policymaking could quickly alter the course of these interactions. As both nations navigate this new landscape, the implications for global trade, technology, and diplomacy will be closely scrutinized. The coming months will likely reveal whether this honeymoon period can translate into a lasting partnership or if it will give way to renewed conflict. In recent weeks, a notable shift in U.S.-China relations has captured attention, particularly with the introduction of impactful legislation aimed at reshaping trade dynamics between the two nations. The bipartisan Restoring Trade Fairness Act, spearheaded by Chairman John Molinar and Congressman Tom Suozzi, seeks to revoke China's permanent normal trade relations (PNTR) status, a move that could significantly alter the economic landscape and reinvigorate discussions on national security and manufacturing integrity. This legislative development comes on the heels of President Trump's executive order, which instructs the Secretary of Commerce and the United States Trade Representative to evaluate proposals related to China's trade standing. The PNTR status, granted in 2000 during China's accession to the World Trade Organization, was intended to foster economic liberalization and fair competition. However, over the past 2 decades, many argue that it has only facilitated the Chinese Communist Party's CCP economic coercion, resulting in substantial job losses and the erosion of America's manufacturing base. The Restoring Trade Fairness Act is a critical step toward ending the unfair economic practices of the Chinese Communist Party that have hurt American workers and weakened our national security, Molinar stated. This sentiment underscores a growing bipartisan consensus in Congress that the status quo is untenable. The legislation aims to safeguard U.S. interests by codifying tariffs and establishing a structured response to China's state-run economic aggression. The proposed bill would eliminate the annual congressional vote required for recertification of China's PNTR status and introduce a new tariff regime. Specifically, it would impose a minimum 35% tariff on non-strategic goods and a minimum 100% tariff on strategic items, with a phased-in approach over 5 years. This measure is designed to counteract the competitive advantages that have allowed Chinese products to flood the U.S. market, often at the expense of domestic manufacturers. Critics of the long-standing trade relationship with China highlight the negative implications of the PNTR status. As Senator Tom Cotton noted, China's permanent normal trade relations status has enriched the Chinese Communist Party while costing the United States millions of jobs. This sentiment is echoed by various stakeholders, including Oren Cass, founder and chief economist of American Compass, who emphasized that the bill addresses the urgent need to restore balance in U.S. China trade relations. The recent United States International Trade Commission report supports the rationale behind the proposed tariffs, indicating that Section 301 tariffs have not significantly contributed to inflation while encouraging shifts in supply chains away from reliance on Chinese imports. This finding reinforces the argument that tariffs can be an effective tool in fostering domestic resilience without adversely affecting consumer prices. As the legislative machinery gears up for what promises to be a contentious debate, the implications of this bill extend beyond trade. It represents a critical juncture in U.S. foreign policy, signaling a pivot towards a more defensive stance against perceived economic threats from China. The intention is not only to protect American jobs but also to bolster national security against a backdrop of increasing geopolitical tensions. Looking ahead, the success of the Restoring Trade Fairness Act could pave the way for a more assertive U.S. trade policy, potentially influencing global supply chains and reshaping alliances. As the world watches how these developments unfold, all eyes will be on the legislative process and its ramifications for U.S.-China relations and the broader international economic order. The outcome may very well determine the future trajectory of not just American manufacturing but the United States' position as a global economic leader. As the geopolitical landscape shifts under the weight of rising powers, the United States finds itself at a critical juncture in its foreign policy, particularly concerning its long-standing competition with China. The emergence of this rivalry has prompted a re-evaluation of U.S. strategies, especially as leaders from both sides of the political spectrum have underscored China's status as America's primary strategic competitor. This evolving dynamic raises pressing questions about the U.S.'s focus on regional conflicts and the implications for its global standing. For the past 2 decades, U.S. foreign policy has been primarily reactionary, dominated by crises in the Middle East and other regions, allowing China to consolidate its position on the world stage. From the aftermath of the September 11 attacks, when the U.S. redirected its military focus to Afghanistan and then to Iraq, vital attention shifted away from China. As a consequence, while the U.S. became embroiled in prolonged conflicts that bred instability, China was quietly building its economic and military capabilities. Today, China stands as a formidable global power, boasting a robust economy, advanced military technologies, and significant control over critical resources like rare earth metals. China's rise is marked by its lead in global manufacturing and exports, coupled with pioneering advancements in 5G technology and military innovations, including hypersonic missiles and a rapidly expanding naval fleet. According to projections, within the next 5 years, China is expected to outpace the U.S. in several cutting-edge sectors such as artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and semiconductor technologies. This trajectory raises alarms about the U.S.'s ability to maintain its influence and leadership in a world increasingly shaped by China's ambitions. Economic impacts are equally concerning. The U.S. national debt has escalated dramatically from around $5.8 trillion before September 11 to approximately $36 trillion by the end of 2024. A stark indicator of the costs associated with prolonged military engagements and foreign policy miscalculations. As U.S. leaders, including former President Donald Trump and current National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, acknowledge the need for a strategic recalibration, the question remains whether the new administration will pivot towards more constructive alliances or continue down a path that risks further entanglement in regional conflicts. The pressure to maintain long-standing alliances, particularly with Israel, poses additional challenges. The U.S.'s commitment to confrontational policies such as against Iran could lead to renewed military interventions that siphon off resources and attention from the Pacific, where the real competition with China lies. Moreover, continued support for groups like the PKK in Syria, which threaten regional stability, raises concerns about the erosion of U.S. power and influence. In this context, Turkey emerges as a crucial ally. As a NATO member with strategic interests in the region, Turkey advocates for counter-terrorism cooperation. The lessons of the past 2 decades reveal a pressing need for a comprehensive reassessment of U.S. foreign policy. The stakes are high, and the decisions made in the coming years will shape the future of American leadership in a world where the balance of power is shifting.